Life seemed perfect for James Chen as he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the San Francisco sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. At 45, he had built TechVision into a $20 billion empire that was changing the way people lived and worked. But what made him most proud wasn't the string of zeros in his bank account, it was the woman who had believed in him when he was nothing but a dreamer with a laptop and a mountain of student debt. His wife Rose had been there since the beginning 15 years ago, when they were just two ambitious souls sharing a tiny studio apartment. He smiled, remembering how she would bring him coffee during those late-night coding sessions, her medical textbooks spread across their second-hand dining table as she studied for her nursing exams. She worked 3 jobs back then: hospital receptionist by day, waitress in the evenings, and weekend tutor, just so he could focus on building his company. "Your dreams are my dreams," she would say, massaging his shoulders when he was ready to give up after another failed investor pitch. They lived on instant noodles and dreams, but somehow those were the happiest days of their lives. The early days of TechVision weren't glamorous. Their office was their apartment's walk-in closet, with a desk made from an old door balanced on plastic crates. Rose would joke that it was the world's smallest tech headquarters, but she made it feel like a Fortune 500 company with little touches: a small potted plant, a framed photo of them, and sticky notes with encouraging messages that she would leave on his monitor. Their big break came when Rose convinced her hospital's administration to try TechVision's patient management software. She believed in his vision so much that she staked her professional reputation on it. The software was a huge success, and word spread quickly in the medical community. Within 2 years, they had contracts with major hospitals across the country. Success brought changes to their lives. They moved from their studio to a beautiful house in Pacific Heights. Rose could finally quit her extra jobs, though she chose to continue nursing because she loved helping people. They traveled the world, bought their dream cars, and could afford anything they wanted. But they still had their Sunday morning tradition of making pancakes together and taking long walks in Golden Gate Park, just like they did when they were broke. Their life looked perfect on paper. Magazine covers featured James as the tech world's golden boy. Rose was his elegant partner at charity galas and industry events, but she never lost her down-to-earth charm. She still packed his lunch when he had important meetings, saying home-cooked meals brought good luck. Their love story was the stuff of Silicon Valley legend, the nurse who supported her husband's dreams until they both made it big. But lately, James had been feeling restless. At 45, he was in the best shape of his life, thanks to his personal trainer and nutritionist. His company was expanding globally, and he was constantly surrounded by young, ambitious people who looked at him with admiration. Something stirred in him when he caught those admiring glances, especially from women who were accomplished and successful in their own right. Rose noticed the changes in him. She saw how he stayed later at the office, how he checked his phone more often during their dinner conversations, how their Sunday pancake tradition sometimes got cancelled for emergency meetings. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she loved him more fiercely, believing that whatever phase this was, they would get through it together. What Rose didn't know was that James had started questioning everything. Had he settled too young? Had success changed him too much for their simple love story? The whispers in his head grew louder at every industry event where he saw other successful men with younger partners who seemed to better fit their current lifestyle. Their 15-year anniversary dinner was at the same little Italian restaurant where they had celebrated his first successful investor pitch. Rose wore the blue dress he loved, and her eyes sparkled as she raised her glass to toast their journey together. "To us," she said, "and to many more years of dreams coming true." James smiled and clinked his glass with hers, but something had shifted inside him. As he watched Rose tell the waiter about their first date at this restaurant, he felt a strange disconnect. The woman before him was beautiful, kind, and had given him her best years. But instead of gratitude, he felt trapped by their history, by her unwavering belief in him, by the very love story that everyone admired. Little did James know that this anniversary dinner would be their last celebration together. Life was about to take an unexpected turn, and the perfect world he and Rose had built was standing on the edge of a cliff. But that night, as they walked home hand in hand under the San Francisco stars, their story still looked perfect to anyone passing by. a billionaire and his devoted wife, living proof that true love could survive the journey from rags to riches. If only they knew what tomorrow would bring. Everything changed the day Olivia Zhang walked into TechVision's headquarters. She wasn't just another executive. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that turned heads and commanded attention. At 28, she had already built and sold 2 successful marketing firms, and now she was leading the merger talks between her current company and TechVision. James found himself looking forward to their meetings more than he should. He noticed little things about her: how she always wore a gold bracelet that caught the light when she gestured, how she took her coffee black with just a hint of cinnamon, how her quick mind could spot solutions to problems that had stumped his team for weeks. Their first private conversation happened by chance. James was working late, as usual, when he heard music coming from one of the conference rooms. He found Olivia there, surrounded by spreadsheets and market analyses, humming along to classical music. "I think better with Baksh," she explained, not embarrassed at being caught. Instead of heading home, James found himself pulling up a chair. They talked for hours that night, not just about business but about their dreams and fears. Olivia shared how she'd left home at 18 with nothing but a scholarship and determination. She understood the hunger for success in a way that few others did. "Sometimes I feel like I'm running out of time," she confessed, "like there's so much more I need to achieve." James felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. He was someone who understood the restlessness that had been gnawing at him, who didn't think his ambitions were excessive. Their late-night conversations became more frequent, always under the pretense of work. Meanwhile, Rose noticed the growing distance but tried harder to bridge it. She surprised him at work with his favorite homemade lunch, but James was in important meetings. She planned weekend getaways, but there were always urgent business matters to attend to. She even started learning about the latest tech trends so they'd have more to talk about, but James's mind seemed elsewhere. The line between professional and personal blurred during a business trip to New York. After a successful presentation, the team went out to celebrate. In the dim light of an upscale bar, with the Manhattan skyline twinkling behind them, James and Olivia found themselves sitting close, their conversation drifting far from business. The energy between them was electric, dangerous, and thrilling. "We shouldn't," James said, even as they stood together in the elevator of their hotel later that night. But one floor turned into another, and soon they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The guilt came later, but in that moment, James felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Back in San Francisco, James became an expert at juggling 2 lives. Business dinners with Olivia stretched late into the night. Weekend strategy sessions became their private time together. He told himself he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just connecting with someone who understood him better. Rose wasn't blind. She saw the changes in her husband, the new clothes, the expensive cologne, the sudden interest in fitness classes at times when the gym should have been closed. She found a receipt for a women's bracelet in his jacket, but their anniversary was months away. Still, she held on to hope, remembering their journey together, believing that their love was stronger than whatever this phase was. The breaking point came during a charity gala. Rose was across the room when she saw how James looked at Olivia. It was the way he used to look at her. The way Olivia's hand lingered on his arm wasn't just professional, and the private joke they shared wasn't just friendly. In that moment, Rose knew, but she waited until they got home to ask the question she dreaded. "Are you having an affair?" James could have denied it, could have gaslit her into thinking she was imagining things, could have promised to end it. Instead, looking at his wife of 15 years, he did something worse. He told the truth. "I think I'm in love with someone else." The words hung in the air like poison. Rose didn't cry, didn't scream. She just looked at him with eyes that had supported his dreams for 15 years and said, "I hope she's worth throwing away everything we built together." James moved out that night into a luxury hotel where Olivia soon joined him. He told himself this was for the best. He and Rose had grown apart. People changed. Life was too short to stay in a relationship out of obligation. Olivia made him feel young, ambitious, unstoppable. The tech world buzzed with gossip. Some called it a midlife crisis, others said they saw it coming. Women's magazines painted Olivia as a homewrecker, while men's magazines celebrated James' courage to follow his heart. Through it all, Rose maintained a dignified silence, even as her world crumbled around her. What James didn't know was that Rose had been keeping a secret of her own, a secret that would change everything in ways he couldn't imagine. But for now, he was caught up in the intoxicating rush of new love, blind to the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Love, they say, makes you blind. But sometimes it's not love that blinds you. It's the excitement of something new, the thrill of forbidden fruit, the illusion that happiness lies in what you don't have rather than what you do. James was about to learn this lesson the hard way, but that revelation was still chapters away in his story. The divorce papers landed on Rose's kitchen table on a sunny Tuesday morning. She stared at them for a long time, her coffee growing cold beside her. 15 years of marriage reduced to 20 pages of legal terminology. Their home, their assets, their shared dreams, all neatly divided into paragraphs and subsections. The news spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire. Tech blogs buzzed with headlines about the power couple's split, with speculation running wild about the settlement amount. But what these stories missed was the quiet dignity with which Rose handled everything. She didn't hire a ruthless divorce attorney. She didn't go to the press with dirty laundry. She simply asked for what the prenup specified, the house they'd bought before TechVision took off, and a modest settlement that was pocket change compared to James's billions. You could take him for so much more, her sister told her during one of their late-night phone calls. Rose just smiled sadly and said, "I didn't support him all those years for money. I'm not going to start now." The hardest part wasn't the legal proceedings or the whispers that followed her at charity events. It was packing up their shared memories. Each photo album was a time capsule of their journey, their first apartment, the launch party of TechVision, holidays, anniversaries, silly moments that meant nothing and everything. Rose carefully placed each album in a box marked James's Things, even though he probably wouldn't want them. Their friends felt forced to choose sides, as friends often do in divorces. Most stuck with James. He was, after all, the billionaire tech genius who threw the best parties and funded their startups. But a few saw through the glamour. His old coding partner, Michael, returned his shares in TechVision with a note that read, "Success is worth nothing if you lose yourself." Olivia wasted no time moving into the penthouse apartment James bought in the city's most exclusive high-rise. She redecorated everything, erasing any trace of Rose's touch. Out went the comfortable leather armchair where James used to read on Sunday mornings. In came sleek, modern furniture that looked straight out of a design magazine. "We're making new memories," she told James, who nodded while trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his chest. The tech world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how this change would affect TechVision. James threw himself into work with renewed energy, determined to prove that this change was for the best. He announced ambitious new projects, made bold predictions about the company's future, and appeared at every high-profile tech event with Olivia on his arm. But in quiet moments when the office emptied and the city lights twinkled below, something felt off. The passion projects he and Rose had dreamed up together, like the educational software for underfunded schools, were quietly shelved. The annual company picnic, which Rose had always organized, became a formal gala at a 5-star hotel. Small changes that spoke volumes. One morning, James stopped at their old favorite coffee shop, the tiny place where he and Rose had spent countless mornings planning their future. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Wu, took one look at him and shook her head. 15 years I watched you two grow together, she said, sliding his usual order across the counter. Now I watch the news and don't recognize the man I see. Rose, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. She sold their old house, too many memories echoed in those walls, and moved somewhere quiet. The few friends who kept in touch said she was doing well, focusing on herself. She had enrolled in some courses, though nobody knew exactly what she was studying. She declined all interview requests, even when magazines offered 6-figure sums for her story. The only time James caught a glimpse of her was through the window of a downtown restaurant, 6 months after the divorce. She was having dinner with friends, and for a moment he was struck by how peaceful she looked. Her smile, though smaller perhaps, was genuine. She had cut her hair shorter, and something about her seemed lighter, as if she had shed more than just their shared past. James stood there longer than he should have, watching the woman who had once been his everything laugh with her friends. His phone buzzed. Olivia wondering where he was, they had dinner reservations at some trendy new place. He turned away from the window, but not before seeing Rose's friend lean in to whisper something that made her eyes light up with joy. That night, James dreamed of their old Sunday morning pancake tradition. He could almost smell the coffee, hear Rose's off-key humming as she mixed the batter, feel the warmth of those simple moments. He woke up in his perfectly designed bedroom, next to Olivia's sleeping form, feeling strangely cold. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Rose had been keeping a secret during those final months of their marriage. A secret that was growing inside her, multiplying in ways that would shake his carefully reconstructed world to its core. But for now, that revelation remained hidden, like a time bomb ticking quietly beneath the surface of their separate lives. Life has a funny way of making you face the consequences of your choices. Sometimes those consequences take years to surface. Sometimes they come in forms you never could have imagined. And sometimes, like in James's case, they come in multiples. 5 years can change everything. For James Chen, those 5 years felt like watching a perfect sandcastle slowly wash away with each incoming tide. The signs were subtle at first, so subtle that he could easily ignore them while basking in his new life with Olivia. The first crack appeared in TechVision's foundation about a year after the divorce. Their new educational software platform, rushed to market under Olivia's aggressive timeline, failed spectacularly. Schools reported bugs that made the system unusable, and the media had a field day criticizing the company that once prided itself on perfect launches. James knew why. Rose had always been their secret beta tester, spending weeks finding problems before any product went live. "It's just one setback," Olivia said during their argument about the launch. "We need to be bold, take risks. That's how you became successful in the first place." But James remembered it differently. His early success had been built on careful planning, on Rose's steady support, on making sure everything worked perfectly before it reached customers. Their relationship started showing cracks too. The passionate discussions about business strategy turned into heated arguments. Olivia's youth and ambition, once so attractive to James, now felt like a constant pressure to prove himself. He found himself exhausted trying to keep up with her social calendar, her desire to be seen at every high-profile event, her insistence on living life at full speed. "You're becoming boring," she told him one night after he suggested staying in instead of attending another startup launch party. "This isn't the man I fell in love with." The words stung because they held the truth he wasn't ready to face. He had been playing a part, trying to be someone he wasn't. The tech world noticed the changes. TechVision's stock price became as volatile as James's mood. Competitors who once feared his innovation now openly challenged his market share. The young programmers who used to work overtime out of loyalty started leaving for other companies. The office culture that Rose had helped build, where everyone felt like family, had been replaced by something colder and more corporate. Then came the photos in the tech blogs. Olivia at a beach club in Miami with a young cryptocurrency billionaire. James confronted her, but her response left him cold. "You wanted excitement and passion," she said, packing her designer clothes into expensive suitcases. "Well, so do I, and lately you're not providing either." She left him for the crypto guy, taking with her the illusion that youth and beauty could guarantee happiness. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman he'd left his wife for had left him for someone younger and richer. Silicon Valley's gossip mills worked overtime, and James became the cautionary tale at dinner parties. In his quieter moments, usually late at night in his now empty penthouse, James found himself thinking about Rose. He'd heard nothing about her in 5 years. It was as if she'd vanished from the face of the earth. Their old friends, the few who still talked to him, claimed they didn't know where she was. But sometimes he caught them checking their phones with small smiles, and he wondered if they were keeping her secret. He tried dating again, hiring an exclusive matchmaker who promised to find him someone age-appropriate and sophisticated. But each date felt like a job interview, with women more interested in his net worth than his thoughts or feelings. He missed the simple intimacy of sharing coffee and dreams with someone who loved him before he had anything to offer except hope. TechVision needed fresh ideas to stay competitive. During a board meeting, someone suggested expanding into healthcare software, the very market where they'd first found success with Rose's hospital connections. James left the meeting early that day, overwhelmed by memories of their early struggles and triumphs. He found himself driving to their old neighborhood, past the small house where they'd started their life together. New owners had painted it blue and planted different flowers, but he could still picture Rose tending to her small garden on weekend mornings. He remembered teasing her about getting dirt on her medical textbooks as she studied under the apple tree. The little Italian restaurant where they used to celebrate every small victory was still there. James walked in, half hoping to find Rose at their old table. Instead, he found Mrs. Romano, the owner's wife, who took one look at him and said, "Sometimes the best thing in life was what you had all along." That night, James dreamed of pancakes on Sunday mornings, of late-night coding sessions fueled by Rose's homemade coffee, of the simple joy of building something together with someone who believed in you completely. He woke up to notifications about tech visions dropping stock prices and another article about innovation stagnation in his company. What he didn't know was that life was about to throw him the biggest curveball yet. In a high-rise hotel in Singapore, fate was preparing a reunion that would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew. Rose's secret was about to multiply his regrets by 4. But for now, James sat in his empty penthouse, surrounded by modern furniture he didn't choose and awards that had lost their meaning, wondering if you can ever find your way back home after you've burned all the bridges behind you. Singapore's Marina Bay Sands Hotel sparkled against the night sky as James Chen stepped out of his taxi. Another tech conference, another speech about innovation, another evening of pretending he was still the visionary leader everyone expected him to be. The weight of his laptop bag felt heavier these days, like it carried not just his presentation but all his failures too. He decided to skip the hotel's restaurants, wanting to avoid the usual crowd of tech entrepreneurs who would corner him with startup pitches. Instead, he wandered into a small upscale Chinese restaurant a few blocks away. The hostess led him to a quiet corner table, and that's when he saw her. Rose sat at a table near the window, more beautiful than he remembered. 5 years had been kind to her. Her dark hair now had subtle highlights, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made her glow. But it wasn't Rose alone that made James's heart stop. It was the 4 children seated around her. They looked about 4 years old, 2 boys on her left, another boy and a girl on her right. They were clearly quadruplets, but that wasn't what made James grab the hostess's chair for support. It was their faces, faces he saw in his own childhood photos, faces that carried his mother's eyes and his father's smile. The girl had his dimples, the ones that only appeared when she laughed, just like his did. James watched, frozen in place, as Rose helped one of the boys cut his noodles into smaller pieces. The children were well behaved, using their chopsticks carefully, occasionally whispering to each other and giggling. They looked like a perfect family having a perfect dinner, except they were his family, a family he knew nothing about. "Sir, would you like to be seated?" The hostess's voice seemed to come from far away. James mumbled something about needing air and stumbled outside. His mind raced with calculations. 4 years old. 5 years since the divorce. The last few months of their marriage when Rose had seemed different, more tired, making frequent doctor's appointments she said were routine checkups. Through the window, he watched as one of the boys, the one who looked most like him, showed Rose something on a children's menu. She leaned down to look, and her smile, that warm smile that used to be the center of his world, lit up her whole face. The girl reached across the table to join the conversation, her little hand gesturing excitedly. James's phone buzzed. Messages about tomorrow's conference, emails about company decisions that needed his input, the usual demands of his life. But for the first time in years, none of it seemed important. His entire world had shrunk to that table by the window, to those 4 small faces that carried his features, to the woman who had kept this enormous secret. He thought about confronting her right there, walking up to the table, demanding answers. But something stopped him, maybe the peaceful scene he'd be disrupting, or maybe the realization that he had lost all right to demand anything from Rose the day he chose to leave. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He called Michael, his old coding partner, the one who had returned his shares in TechVision. "I found Rose," he said when Michael answered. "She has kids. 4 of them. They're mine, Michael. They have to be mine." The silence on the other end lasted a long time. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice heavy with meaning. "Remember when Rose was going through those medical treatments the last year of your marriage? The ones you were too busy to ask about?" The memory hit James like a physical blow. Rose had been doing IVF treatments. They had frozen embryos years earlier when they were first trying to start a family. He had been so caught up in his affair with Olivia that he hadn't even thought about what had happened to those embryos. She found out she was pregnant 2 weeks after you asked for the divorce, Michael continued. She asked us all to keep it quiet. Said she didn't want anything from you, not even for the kids. She's built a whole new life, James, a good one. Through the window, James watched as Rose and the children finished their dinner. The waiter brought fortune cookies, and the kids cracked them open with delight, taking turns reading their fortunes aloud. Rose helped the girl sound out a difficult word, her hand gently guiding her daughter's finger across the paper. What are their names? James whispered into the phone. That's not my story to tell, Michael replied. But I will tell you this, they know they have a father. Rose never speaks badly about you, she just says you had different dreams. As the family stood to leave, James pressed himself against the wall, not ready to be seen. The boys held hands as they walked out, the girl skipping ahead, Rose keeping a watchful eye on all of them. Their happy chatter faded as they disappeared into the Singapore night. James slid down the wall to sit on the sidewalk, ignoring the curious looks from passers-by. His perfect life with Rose hadn't been perfect enough for him 5 years ago. Now she had created something truly perfect without him, while his own life had become an empty showcase of achievements that meant nothing without someone to share them with. Tomorrow, he would have to decide what to do with this knowledge. Tonight, he sat under the Singapore stars, mourning the loss of not just his marriage, but of 4 years of bedtime stories, first words, and childhood memories he could never get back. The morning after seeing Rose and the children, James cancelled his conference speech. For the first time in his career, he didn't care about the professional consequences. He spent hours walking through Singapore's streets, his mind replaying every detail of the previous night's discovery. He found himself outside the restaurant again, this time in daylight. The sane hostess was there, arranging menus. Taking a deep breath, he approached her. The family from last night, the woman with 4 children. Do they come here often? The hostess smiled warmly. Mrs. Lee and the little ones. Every Thursday evening. They live in the condo building next door. She must have seen something in James' expression because she added, Are you a friend of the family? James didn't know how to answer that. What was he to them? A stranger? Their father? The man who walked away? Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Rose knows you saw them. Ball's in your court, but remember, they're not just your story to tell. With trembling fingers, James typed out a message to Rose. Can we talk? Please. Her reply came hours later, just 3 words, Ocean Park. 2 p.m. He'd found her sitting on a bench overlooking the water, wearing a simple blue dress that reminded him of their first date. She looked serene, confident, nothing like the devastated woman he'd left behind 5 years ago. Their names are William, Thomas, Henry, and Grace, she said before he could speak. They're 4 years and 3 months old. They're healthy, happy, and very loved. She turned to face him, her eyes clear and direct. What do you want, James? The question hit him like a wave. What did he want? To be their father? To disrupt the peaceful life Rose had built? To make up for 5 years of absence? I want to understand, he managed. Why didn't you tell me? Rose's laugh was soft but held no humor. Tell you what, that the IVF worked? You were too busy with Olivia to notice I was going to appointments. When I found out I was pregnant, you had already moved out. The divorce papers were already filed. She pulled out her phone, showing him pictures. The quadruplets as newborns, tiny and perfect. Their first birthday, 4 little faces covered in cake. A recent Christmas morning, all of them in matching pajamas. William loves dinosaurs and wants to be a scientist. Thomas is our artist, he draws on everything, including walls. Henry is the quiet one, always thinking, always watching. And Grace, Rose's voice softened. Grace is you all over again. She can't see a computer without wanting to know how it works. James stared at the photos, trying to memorize every detail. How did you manage? 4 babies at once. I used the divorce settlement to start an international healthcare consulting firm. Working from home meant I could be there for every moment. My sister moved in to help. Michael and his wife became their honorary aunt and uncle. She paused. "We're not your charity case, James. We've built a good life." "I'm not offering charity," James said quietly. I want to know them." Rose was silent for a long moment, watching the boats in the harbor. "They know about you." I showed them pictures. Told them their father was a brilliant man who helped create technology that makes people's lives better. I never wanted them to feel abandoned. "But I did abandon them," James whispered, "even if I didn't know about them." "Yes, you did." Rose's voice was gentle but firm. "And now you have to understand, they're not an extension of your redemption story. They're their own people with their own lives and routines and sense of security. I won't let anyone disrupt that, not even their father." James felt tears forming. "What can I do? Please, Rose." "There must be something." She handed him a business card. "This is my lawyer's contact. We can discuss supervised visits, starting slowly. 1 hour a week in my presence. If that goes well for 6 months, we can talk about more time. But understand this, one wrong move, one attempt to use your money or influence to change the arrangement, and it stops immediately." "They're going to hate me," James said, voicing his deepest fear. Rose shook her head. "They're children. They have more capacity for love and forgiveness than we give them credit for. But you have to be sure, James, really sure. Because if you come into their lives and leave again," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. As the sun began to set, Rose stood to leave. "Think about it. Talk to your lawyer. But remember, this isn't about you and me anymore. It's about 4 little people who deserve nothing but the best from both of us." She started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and James, that education software that failed last year. The problem wasn't in the code, it was in the user interface. Children don't think like adults. You used to know that back when you cared more about helping people than impressing them." James watched her disappear into the crowd, her words echoing in his mind. He looked down at the business card in his hand, his ticket to knowing his children if he could prove worthy of the chance. That night, in his hotel room, he pulled up TechVision's education software on his laptop. For the first time in years, he started coding not for profit or prestige, but with 4 specific users in mind, hoping that somewhere in Singapore, his children might someday use what their father created and smile. 1 year later, James stood at the back of a crowded charity gala in Singapore, his heart swelling with pride as Rose took the stage. The annual Tech for Education Awards were prestigious, and Rose's healthcare education initiative had transformed how medical training was delivered to remote areas across Asia. "Success isn't just about creating something new," Rose said into the microphone, her voice confident and clear. "It's about making sure it reaches the people who need it most." 4 small figures in the front row clapped the loudest: William, Thomas, Henry, and Grace, dressed in their best clothes, beaming at their mother. James watched from his designated spot, respecting the boundaries that had been carefully drawn over the past year. The weekly supervised visits had started awkwardly, 4 curious children and their nervous father trying to bridge a 5-year gap with board games and careful conversations. Grace had been the first to warm up to him, her eyes lighting up when he showed her how to write her first line of code. "Mom says you make computers do magic," she had said, scooting closer to see the screen. Within weeks, they were building simple games together, her little fingers flying over the keyboard with natural talent. William brought his dinosaur books to every visit, determined to teach James everything about paleontology. "Did you know T-Rex had feathers?" He'd ask, his excitement making him stutter slightly. "Just like birds." James learned to come prepared with new dinosaur facts, cherishing the way his son's face lit up with each discovery. Thomas was harder to reach until James noticed him drawing during one visit. Now they spent time creating comic strips together, Thomas's imagination spinning wild stories that James helped bring to life with simple animations. "Can we make it move?" Thomas would ask, and James would show him how technology could make his art dance. Henry, the quiet observer, took the longest to open up. He preferred to watch his siblings interact with James, studying everything with thoughtful eyes. But one day, he silently handed James a paper airplane, and they spent an hour making it fly better, adding small adjustments until it soared perfectly. Sometimes the smallest gestures built the strongest bridges. Rose had kept her word about boundaries. The visits remained supervised, but as months passed, The atmosphere relaxed. She would work on her laptop nearby, occasionally joining their conversations, helping to fill in gaps in the children's stories that James had missed. Tech Vision had changed too. James had completely revamped the education software division, this time with a panel of actual teachers and students as consultants. The same program that had failed a year ago was now being adopted by schools across Asia, with a special version donated to underfunded districts. The Children's Hospital program is next, Rose announced from the stage, drawing James back to the present. Every child deserves access to the best medical care, regardless of where they live. The audience applauded, but James noticed she was looking at their children, her real motivation sitting right there in the front row. After the ceremony, James maintained his distance as the children hugged their mother, showering her with congratulations and handmade cards. But Grace spotted him and waved, his smile, brightening the room. The other children turned to look, and after a questioning glance at their mother, ran over to show him their cards too. Mom said we can have ice cream to celebrate, William announced. She said you can come too if you want. The invitation, hesitant but genuine, meant more than any business deal he'd ever closed. Rose joined them, elegant in her award gown. Ice cream sounds perfect, she said. I know a place nearby that has all the flavors you can imagine. The ice cream shop was small, nothing like the fancy restaurants James used to frequent. But watching his children debate between chocolate and strawberry, seeing Rose help them with napkins and spills, felt more luxurious than any five-star meal. I'm proud of you, Rose said quietly while the children were distracted by their desserts. You've really shown up for them this year. I had a good teacher, James replied, watching as Grace carefully shared her sprinkles with Henry. You showed me what really matters. As they left the shop, Grace slipped her small hand into his, a gesture that still amazed him every time it happened. Can you help me with my coding project next week? She asked. I want to make something special for Mom's birthday. If it's okay with your mother, James said, looking at Rose. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Walking back through the Singapore evening, James realized something profound. He had spent years chasing what he thought was happiness, success, youth, excitement. But real joy was here, in these small moments. Thomas showing him a new drawing, William reciting dinosaur facts, Henry's quiet smile, Grace's gentle squeeze of his hand. He would never get back the years he lost. He would never be the full-time father he could have been. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. But maybe, just maybe, he could be something else. A father who learned from his mistakes, who showed up consistently, who proved that love could build new bridges even after burning the old ones. As the family reached their building, the children hugged him goodbye, a new tradition that still brought tears to his eyes. Rose gave him a gentle nod, acknowledging how far they'd all come. See you next week, Dad, Grace called as they walked away, and in that moment, James Chen, the billionaire who once had everything and lost it all, felt truly rich for the first time in his life. As they left the shop, Grace slipped her small hand into his, a gesture that still amazed him every time it happened. Can you help me with my coding project next week? She asked. I want to make something special for Mom's birthday. If it's okay with your mother, James said, looking at Rose. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Walking back through the Singapore evening, James realized something profound. He had spent years chasing what he thought was happiness, success, youth, excitement. But real joy was here, in these small moments. Thomas showing him a new drawing, William reciting dinosaur facts, Henry's quiet smile, Grace's gentle squeeze of his hand. He would never get back the years he lost. He would never be the full-time father he could have been. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. But maybe, just maybe, he could be something else. A father who learned from his mistakes, who showed up consistently, who proved that love could build new bridges even after burning the old ones. As the family reached their building, the children hugged him goodbye. A new tradition that still brought tears to his eyes. Rose gave him a gentle nod, acknowledging how far they'd all come. See you next week, Dad, Grace called as they walked away, and in that moment, James Chen, the billionaire who once had everything and lost it all, felt truly rich for the first time in his life.